When I was traveling in Australian desert, I went for a swim to a beautiful waterhole. The water was calm, almost perfectly still. I left my car keys inside my shoe on the shore, a small act of order before stepping into something less predictable. When I came back, the keys were gone, and immediately my mind began constructing disaster. Someone stole them, they slipped into the grass, my spare keys were 1,000 kilometers away, the trip was over. For several long minutes, the world felt unstable, fragile, hostile. Then I noticed them, just a few meters away, and I realized the crowd had taken them, carried them, and dropped them nearby. I stood there laughing in relief, but also strangely humbled, because the crowd could have just as easily dropped them into the lake. One tiny event, completely outside my awareness, could have changed the entire course of my journey. And in that moment I realized something. Chaos had not ruined the experience. It had revealed the playful intelligence of life itself. The trickster appears whenever structures become too fixed, too proud, too convinced of their own permanence. And interestingly, the trickster is rarely cruel. Often it arrives through irony, through humor, through accidents, through absurdity. It reminds us that life is alive, not mechanical, because rigid things eventually shatter under pressure. Flexible things adapt. Sometimes intelligence is not about strength at all. Sometimes it is about responsiveness, improvisation, the ability to dance with uncertainty instead of trying to eliminate it. The trickster teaches us that life is fluid and constantly changing. It pushes us beyond comfort zones into growth we did not consciously choose. The trickster reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously, because rigid structures break under pressure, while flexibility allows us to bend, adapt, and continue. I remember reading about an indigenous tribe in Thailand after the 2004 tsunami. While entire coastlines were devastated, this community survived unharmed. Long before the wave arrived, they had already moved to higher ground. At first, people described it almost like magic, but the truth was far more profound. For generations, they had carried an ancient story describing the warning signs of the sea before a great wave. The unusual movement of the water, the silence, the behavior of animals, the feeling in the air. When those signs appeared again, they recognized the pattern, they listened, and they survived. Through songs, dances, stories, which are all sophisticated collective memory techniques, they had preserved something modern society often forgets: the ability to participate deeply enough in the world to recognize its rhythms. For the past 15 years, I've lived much of my life close to wilderness, and slowly I began noticing these rhythms too. One difficult year in the landscape is often followed by abundance. Abundance leads to exploding mice population. Then predators arrive, owls, snakes, foxes. Eventually the mice decline again and the entire system shifts into another phase. At first it appears chaotic, But over time you realize the system is moving in cycles, endlessly adapting, endlessly reorganizing itself. Nature does not fear instability. Nature uses it. Forests regenerate after fire, and fire even enhances growth. Rivers reshape landscapes through flooding. Ecosystems evolve through disruption. It is an illusion that we are separate from our environment. We are not in an empty space, never had been. We are in fact a part of a much greater organism, and we constantly react to it. And there is a pattern to the universe and everything in it. There are knowledge systems and traditions that follow this pattern to maintain balance within the community and within each individual. Control has a lot to do with safety, which is a basic human need. But emphasized control and exaggerated need for stability do not guarantee safety at all, because they are not in accordance with natural law, with how the reality of this world works. Everything in this world is in constant motion. Stability is only possible through constant movement and flexibility. Chaos and its offspring, creativity, are the generative forces of the universe, and order perpetually emerges from disorder. Order forms not despite disorder, but because of it. Indigenous science that I've been exploring and partially living throughout my life approaches reality through correlation, understanding that knowledge emerges through continuous interaction with living systems, rather than dominion over them. The true reality of the universe is a network of perpetually changing relationships. Modern science is beginning to describe reality in remarkably similar ways. Chaos theory tells us that tiny events can transform enormous systems. A small disturbance in one place creates consequences somewhere else entirely. This became famous as the butterfly effect. The idea that something as delicate as a butterfly flapping its wings could eventually influence a storm across the world. Not because the universe is random, but because everything is connected. Weather systems, economies, human emotions, forests, relationships. Nothing exists in isolation. And when scientists began studying living systems more deeply, they discovered something even stranger. Order often emerges spontaneously from instability itself, without central control, without anyone directing the whole. Ecosystems function this way, and the internet grew without central control. Life organizes itself through relationships. How can these insights benefit our social structures? How can enterprises achieve stability in a world of rapid change, stay flexible and innovative, and engage in activities that are more appropriate to the situations that surround them? It sometimes seems that when uncertainty increases, organizations and societies respond with even more control and more rigidity. It feels safer. But it might be just exercising control over the creative process trying to happen. Closed systems eventually stagnate. Living systems survive because they remain open to feedback, diversity, creativity, and change. The survival of any self-organizing system depends upon its ability to keep itself open to the flow of energy and matter through it. What some perceive as chaos in reality has a structure that produces innovation. Systems are not stable, and realistically, it makes no sense to plan our future around them. The key is to stay attentive, open, flexible, and creative with each constantly changing situation. Just as monocultures are the least healthy environments, groups of like-minded individuals are the least flexible. Encouraging autonomy and broad, even unusual diversity can bring outstanding creative results, an organic fluidity that matches fluctuating environments. In its continually new form, the organization becomes at least as elastic and sensitive as the situation it faces. And perhaps this is where many of us stand now, between stories. And maybe the deeper invitation is not to conquer uncertainty, but to learn how to move with it, creatively, attentively, responsibly. Chaos does not remove meaning, it asks us to participate in creating it. And this is where chaos becomes deeply personal, because every one of us participates in this unfolding. Every action sends ripples outward, every risk, every act of kindness, every idea pursued despite uncertainty. We tend to imagine creativity belonging only to artists, inventors, or scientists. But creation is happening continuously through all of us, through the way we speak, the way we respond to difficulty, the way we influence the systems around us. The universe is unfinished, and so are we. Of course, uncertainty is uncomfortable. When crisis arrives, the mind races. Emotions collide. Old fears and learned responses struggle for control. We want solid ground. We want guarantees. But perhaps the goal is not to eliminate uncertainty. Perhaps the goal is to become more graceful with it, to recognize that stability and safety are not the same thing. A rigid tree snaps in the storm. A flexible one bends. And maybe wisdom is less about predicting the future than learning how to participate intelligently in change. Most of us were educated to expect predictable pathways, study hard, build a career, find certainty, control the future. But reality behaves less like a machine and more like weather. It shifts, it reorganizes itself. And perhaps many of the crises we experience personally are not signs that life is broken. Perhaps they are signs that old structures no longer fit the reality emerging around us. And often, so the next time Trickster tells you a joke, consider the possibility that you might be standing at the beginning of a new form. And somewhere inside that unfolding process, in small choices, quiet awareness, perception of intuitive signals, you are creating that story, not fully controlled, but lived. And as being a part of a greater whole, being sensitive to it and respecting it, in return, we are gifted the vast knowledge that is impossible on individual timeline and the ability to see the patterns that form this beautiful, magical life.